For the next hour, I'm excited with our guest today. We have Allum Bokhari, senior tech reporter at Breitbart News. Now, I don't know a lot about what's going on with the tech world, but from my understanding, it is in really bad shape vis-a-vis, I love that expression, enforcing certain kind of speech codes, manipulating people. I had, as my guest from a few weeks ago, the guys from the documentary The Creepy Line, which you might be familiar with, discussing all these manipulations that can be done behind the scenes. And there's also this kind of idea that's, I think, very intentionally promulgated in culture that, oh, if you think that all these companies are manipulating you, it's get your tinfoil hat, conspiracy theory, this is nonsense. And the example he used, which blew me away. He goes, every so often you'll see YouTube or Facebook or Google or something will say, go out and vote. And they said, what if they decided to send that go out and vote just to, let's say, Democrats or just to Republicans, people who identify as one or the other? Clearly, that would have an effect on the electorate. And more importantly, you'd have no way of knowing. So there's so many subtle ways that things are being done. Now, so, to me, as the uneducated layman, how bad is it?
It's so brazen, like it's not even funny. You can't call it a conspiracy theory anymore. No one can. This is a line that Democrats on the Judiciary Committee have run with. So it's a line the mainstream media have run with. They're all saying it's conspiracy, but Google themselves, their own internal research admitted that what is currently happening is censorship. We released this document on Breitbart.com called "The Good Censor," an internal research briefing from Google, in which they admit.
So this was not meant for public consumption.
No. This was something that was given to us, leaked from inside the company.
Right.
And it essentially says that, it admits to a number of things that right-wing media has been pointing out for a while. One, that the internet has been taken over by a small number of companies.
But hold on, I gotta correct you. I don't even know if this is necessarily right-wing media. Like, when I talked to Charlie Nash, our colleague, who is one of the most awesome people ever and is absolutely hilarious and adorable, he pointed out that, I'm can of worms here, Gamergate, a lot of these people weren't right-wing. They just wanted fairness. And if you want to be biased, be biased, but just admit your bias.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and to correct myself, ordinary people on the internet, whether they're left or right, have been noticing for a while because it's obvious. But if we're looking purely at the media, the mainstream media has been ignoring this topic, whereas more partisan conservative media like Breitbart.com, we've been the first to cover this and expose it over the past 2 years, while everyone else has been trying to ignore it or even been encouraging it.
And I think the reason is a lot of conservative media, because I don't know Breitbart's conservative per se, but a lot of conservative media are run by older people. And as a function of this, they don't understand the computer. Like Judge Judy's like, I don't go on the computer. My grandkids do it. So as a result, if it's something that they don't get, just like for decades, the right wing didn't really understand culture. And you had literal communist infiltration, but because that's not their worldview, they kind of gave up by default. And this seems to be a similar thing happening now. And that allows the left, who have a very vested interest, the evangelical left specifically, to kind of put these things over. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
Well, I'd agree with that. The left got in on the whole tech journalism beat very early on. You look at the mainstream tech media, The Verge, TechCrunch, Wired magazine. These are all, left-wing outlets, and not just, moderate left-wing outlets. Wired is far, far left. They're talking about white privilege and culture of misogyny and tech and all the stuff we hear from, gender studies graduates. So it's not even moderate left, it's far left. That's what you have in the tech press right now. And for a long while, we didn't really have a conservative-leaning tech press. It was only in 2015, I believe, end of 2015, when we founded Breitbart Tech, that I think conservative media began covering this in a serious manner. And it's really exploded, this issue, over the past 3 or 4 years. And to be honest, I think it'll probably be the major issue for conservatives going into 2020.
What do you mean?
In terms of the priority that the conservative grassroots place on it.
Oh yeah. Let's talk about some of the things that that are actually being done by these companies that people are having an issue with.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just in the past month, we've seen, you're a man who follows memes quite closely on the internet, yes. Especially the good ones, and the NPC is an excellent one. Yes. I think you'll agree. Just to explain to listeners, the NPC meme is this meme that sort of...
I broke down the whole NPC meme.
Oh, you've already done it? Oh, of course. Oh, you're way ahead of us.
I think it's the most important meme of our lifetime.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it stands for non-playable characters in a video game, and these are characters that have sort of scripts. They don't really have agency, unlike a playable character. And it's a pretty good metaphor for leftists who just parrot what the mainstream media tells them.
I don't think it's just about leftists. I think it works for boomers, too. It works for right-wingers. There's plenty of right-wingers who do not have critical thought.
That's a fair point, right-wing NPCs.
Of course.
Do you follow the We Was Boomers
account? And I just tweeted out, like, not that long ago, I tweeted out, next time Angela Merkel gets uppity, remind her that she would be speaking German if it wasn't for us. So that kind of mindset is the right-wing boomer, is the right-wing NPC. Yeah.
And to be honest, I don't know who runs that account. It could be a crazy person, but it's certainly collated a lot of the sort of regurgitated right-wing memes, as well as some, pretty generic left-wing ones as well. But anyway, going back to your question, which is what are Silicon Valley companies doing? This NPC meme bothered the left so much, they were complaining about it. They were writing news articles saying this dehumanizes us. Twitter recently introduced a rule against dehumanizing language.
Right.
So under this rule, they banned thousands and thousands of accounts that were using the NPC meme to mock liberals. Meanwhile, they leave, open anti-Semites like Louis Farrakhan on the platform. So the double standards are so obvious now. And the election interference is obvious. Like, they're not even trying to hide it. Marsha Blackburn, just in the past few days, had her ads blocked on Google, on Facebook as well. She's previously had her ad blocks on Twitter. In the recent election in Toronto, Faith Goldie had her ads blocked by Google. In Brazil, Facebook and WhatsApp shut down, dozens and dozens of groups with millions of followers that were supporting, how do you pronounce
Bolsonaro.
Jair Bolsonaro.
Yeah.
Before the French election, Facebook suspended over 20,000 accounts for spreading misinformation. And they already do it. They always do it right before elections. They don't wait till the election's over. So they wait for the crucial last couple of weeks where you really need all those influencers and all those accounts to mobilize your base and get people to the polls. They wait until the last second and then they ban them. So it's so obvious to me, the election interference.
What I don't think people have made this connection other than me, and I'm glad to be able to make it here on this show. I've made it on Nightshade also. McCain-Feingold, this was the crown piece of John McCain's political career, was a bill that was passed here. And basically among some of the other caveats, and I might be getting this a little bit wrong, but there was one provision that was something like you could not criticize, if you were, I think, a corporation, or if you were a 501c3 or something, one of those, you could not criticize a politician within X number of days of an election. It was insane. And their point was, well, we can't defend ourselves because these people have an order of magnitude more money. And it was struck down as unconstitutional because it's, horrifying and Orwellian. And this is basically a continuation of that. Well, we couldn't do it through the legal process, so we're going to do it through the extra legal process. And one of the reasons I always say the corporate press is because leftists, historically, and one of the best things about them is they understood the corporations. They have an agenda. This is not for the common good. The corporations are going to set the rules to make sure they benefit, and everyone else is fucked. But somehow when the corporations are tech corporations, they're going to act differently from those corporations you hated as a kid. No. This is exactly how they act. And this should surprise no one. And I remember, 15 or 20 years ago, there were all these articles saying that a corporation is like a sociopathic person, making that comparison. The brazenness is something that I think is unprecedented because there used to be a pretense otherwise.
Yeah, and we see this from their allies in the Democrats as well. Again and again, they say, the tech companies say, we're not biased, we don't censor on the basis of viewpoint, and they always shroud their actions in neutral language. We're just cracking down on misinformation, we're just cracking down on hate speech. These are supposedly neutral things. But, when Gavin McInnes gets all of his accounts nuked for his association with the Proud Boys, whereas, you see Antifa accounts regularly on social media calling for violence, and nothing happens to them.
Right.
They don't lose any of their accounts. So the double standards are so obvious.
And one of the points I've made many times is words like common sense, fair, are objective sounding, but they just mean I don't like it. And they provide the veneer of objectivity, even for the speaker often, because a lot of times some of these NPCs will be like, I'm not trying to take away your guns. I just want common sense gun control. It's like common sense is not mean the same thing to you as it does for everyone else, although you are of the belief that it does.
The newest one that worries me of these objective sounding terms is extremism.
Oh, well, that's not new. Ayn Rand wrote an article about this in the 60s. So Barry Goldwater, the 1964 Republican presidential candidate, let me sidebar here because this is a value to the listeners. Well, very little on this show is a value to the listeners, but maybe this will be. Barry Goldwater was the first really right-wing political candidate the Republicans ran since 1928. So this was like a good 36 years.
Oh yeah, he paved the way for Reagan.
Absolutely. Reagan gave that speech, supporting him, and that launched his political career. Well, to some extent, he also had the Screen Actors Guild. And they kept attacking him for extremism. Nelson Rockefeller, the quintessential squishy Republican, had to speak at the Cow Palace at the convention.
The John McCain of his day.
He's much worse than John McCain. Much worse than John McCain. And Goldwater got up, and part of his speech, he said, let me remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue, and extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. And people were gasping like, oh my goodness, I can't believe he gave the finger into their face.
I believe you guys fought a revolution because your taxes got raised. I mean,
yeah,
wow,
so like
overreaction
5%.
Much.
Yeah. And to conclude this is also why I say one of the worst of the so-called neocons and the anti-Trump Republicans is Max Boot, because he not that long ago tweeted out that he said, oh, I've just been doing research, and it turns out Barry Goldwater was an extremist too. It's like, his famous quote is literally a defense of extremism, and you're pretending that you're at age, 60? I don't know how old that troglodyte is. You're just learning that now that he defended extremism, you're a fucking liar. And that's the point. The disingenuousness is the issue. And the other, let's talk about the media. So many more people on the right hate CNN over MSNBC, because MSNBC this is your left-wing point of view. We're giving
They're open about it.
They're open about it, and it's fine. CNN. So who are the purveyors in the tech world that are doing this kind of thing, where they're acting like we're just a tech site, but we're actually jihadis?
You can name any one of them, frankly. I think Gizmodo, strangely, is somewhat better than the other ones. They occasionally run pretty objective stories. They actually broke the story about Facebook back in 2016. They broke a story about Facebook discriminating against conservative news stories in trending topics. So they broke that one. So Gizmodo can be okay. But like any of the others, The Verge, Polygon, that's a video games oriented one, TechCrunch is slightly less biased, but still pretty left-wing. Wired magazine is a nightmare. You should see some of the, none spring to mind, but you see some of the headlines they're running about identity politics. It's crazy. And Wired was once seen as like the most prestigious tech news magazine. It was actually a magazine. It wasn't just a digital publication. I'm trying to think of other examples.
But here's something I don't understand. I don't play video games.
Yeah.
Right? I don't understand how a video game site, if I'm talking about a plumber eating mushrooms and shooting fireballs, where does politics come into it at all?
Well, think back to how feminists still talk about movies, and talk about movies in the 60s and 70s, about how they reinforced patriarchy. Have you heard of the Bechdel test?
Of course, Alison Bechdel.
This test feminists invented, how much does a woman character speak versus male characters. So they've always analyzed pop culture via this sort of identity politics lens. They just did the same thing to video games. Video games are sexist because, Lara Croft's boobs are too big, that kind of thing.
So they're body shaming Lara Croft?
Yeah, they are. Allegations that the Civilization series, which is a sort of like an empire building game, you run a civilization, you build it up, promotes colonialism, that kind of thing.
But are they actually
not enough minority characters in video games which are set in medieval Europe?
So this is complete total fundamentalism.
Oh yeah,
vis-a-vis their faith.
Yeah, actually, and some companies are caving into it. I'm not sure if you saw it was Battlefield 1, I believe, had Battlefield 1 is set in World War One, And I believe, I may not be entirely correct on this, but I believe the character on the front cover of that game was a disabled woman holding a gun. I don't believe any army in World War One sent disabled women with guns to the front line, but maybe my historical skills are lacking.
Well, maybe towards the end with the Kaiser. I mean, he's fucking running out of people, so he's going to draft who he can. So, wow. So, but my understanding, and please tell me if I'm way off on this, and I got this also from talking to Charlie, is that there's a huge counter reaction to this in places like Reddit and 4chan, where people are being called on their bullshit in real time.
This has been one of the great scars of the culture war that the left has had to deal with, because one of the first groups to effectively fight back against them, starting in 2014, was the gamers. The gamers decided, okay, we've had enough of this politically correct crap. They had already had experience fighting conservative, social conservatives back in the 90s who said games cause violence and school shootings. It was part of the whole war on sort of, rap lyrics and games and Harry Potter promoting witchcraft, that whole side of the conservative movement, which thankfully seems to be in the decline at the moment. So they already had experience with political types trying to impose their values on video games. And they just saw feminists and identity politics on the left doing the same thing. And they had this massive counter-revolution in 2014. They still have very active subreddits which focus on censorship. I believe it's called search for Kotaku in Action on Reddit. Kotaku is one of these left-wing video game sites. So Kotaku in Action is meant to mock the leftists of video games. So they still keep a very close eye on censorship, and I think partly because they're gamers, they're very good at organizing online, because many of the video games in the past 10, 15 years have been, many of the biggest ones, like World of Warcraft, have been all about organizing online and, forming groups and coordinating.
Right.
So a lot of them already had that experience of sort of online activism, you could say. Well, at least online organizing. And actually, World of Warcraft predated Facebook and Twitter. It was before those sites became big. So gamers have been organizing and socializing online for a long time.
InfiniteCBD.com is the cleanest, healthiest, and purest form of CBD available. CBD has become really popular, seen everywhere. You know why? Because it works. You get the benefits of marijuana, but you don't get high. So if you take the PM pills, for example, it's got CBD and melatonin, which helps you get to sleep. The AM pills have CBD and caffeine, helps get work done, wakes you up in the morning. There's also a topical cream, Freezing Point. It reduces inflammation. It's great on sore muscles, anything that hurts. You got DOMS. This is what you want. We love working with Infinite CBD because it's the absolute highest quality CBD in the market. They've got this double extraction method, and the end result is the products are over 99% CBD. Other companies use CBD oil. This is pure CBD isolate. Research has shown that CBD helps people who have chronic pain, inflammation, anxiety. 42% of CBD users have stopped taking traditional medications, and they've got a full range of products. They've got the gummies, they've got the capsules, they've got the topical creams. You have a lot of choices. So if you use promo code WELCOME15 at InfiniteCBD.com, you get 30% off the month of November. TikTok. So go to InfiniteCBD.com, use promo code WELCOME15, and for December only, you're getting 30% off. Not too shabby.
I talk about this in my upcoming book, which is what was very helpful with Gamergate is, and there's a certain type of leftist they're going after. They don't mean people who are just left of center. They mean people who view their agenda to promulgate their worldview through any means necessary. And they had the epiphany of, we're not going to fight back and be like, oh, I'm not racist, and engage with these people. They regarded them like, the example I use is, and I'm showing my age here, when you're playing Super Mario Brothers and there's the Goomba coming at you, the mushroom, the only thing it wants to do is move and try to kill you. It doesn't have a goal. You're not going to talk him into not trying to kill you. You have to figure out how it works. You can shoot the Goomba with fire. You can't shoot the Buzzy Beetle with fire. You can stomp on him, so on and so forth. And they're like, okay, we have this organized enemy. Let's figure out what tactics they use. Let's figure out what counter tactics are effective against those. And the pretense that this is going to be some kind of debate is secondary to realizing they will use whatever tactics they need to in order to have cultural hegemony.
Yeah, I mean, the classic analogy is that gamers are relentless in achieving their goals. They're perfectly willing to play the same level over and over and over again, fight the same boss over and over and over again until they win.
And this
so
is
they're
where
very persistent by nature.
And this is where the expression, which is not really that much of a joke, weaponized autism comes from. Because
they take it as a badge of pride. They don't see it as an insult.
Right, because they're like, all right, I can be fixated
Yeah.
on some, like, for example, if people want to look up, there are these speed runs of different games. So not only is it how I can beat Mario, it's how fast can I beat it doing the mathematically maximum possible.
Yeah, they'll play it on like the hardest difficulty setting possible.
Yeah,
or give themselves the most handicaps possible. So yeah,
right,
it's fun to them.
But they are so tunnel vision and fixated. This is kind of people who are on the spectrum do have that quality, and they're like, all right, all I want to do is play my game and chop up goblins, and all of a sudden you're here talking about the patriarchy. It's just like, I just want to be left alone.
Yeah, their favorite slogan is, I just wanted to play video games, and now I have to save the world from leftists and elect Donald Trump.
Is that really it?
Yeah. And, even today, just to emphasize for your listeners how much this movement of gamers scarred the cultural left, they're still running op-eds and articles today saying, Gamergate led to the alt-right, Gamergate led to Donald Trump, Gamergate led to Brexit. That they're literally saying that this movement started it all.
What an odd endorsement of Gamergate.
Yeah, and to be honest, they have a little bit of a point. Because
of course they do.
I've looked at some of the research, and there is actually an overlap between the hardcore gamer demographic and Donald Trump's support base. Because people who are most likely to spend a lot of time on games, at least in America, are sort of out of work, young males in these sort of impoverished areas of America, the Rust Belt. Because obviously, you're a young guy in those areas, you don't have a lot of prospects, not a lot of jobs, you have to stay at home all day. What's the hobby of choice? Probably video games. So it's like they already had a tough life with little prospects. But they still have their video games.
Yeah.
And suddenly the left are coming in there as well and saying, hey, you're a racist, you're a bigot for playing these video games, you're a bad person. We're going to change your video games to make it more politically correct. You can see why a lot of them so we've had enough.
Well, it's also the kind of thing like, yeah, well, I don't have any black friends because I have any white friends. I'm here by myself. What do you want from me? Here's the question. You just mentioned...
And now you want to take my internet friends away from me as well.
Right. You mentioned the Rust Belt. You were from Britain.
I am, yes.
There was a very famous BuzzFeed, not famous, but a BuzzFeed piece that pointed out that most Americans can't name all the countries in Europe on a map, right? Like, we don't know Finland versus Denmark and so on and so forth. Do you think if you had an atlas, you'd be able to know where all 50 states are?
An atlas?
Well, like if I gave you a map with the states and you have to fill in the names.
Yeah, pretty sure.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay, which is north, Wyoming or Colorado?
Wyoming.
Correct. That's a tricky one because they look.
No, it's not.
Because Colorado's
Colorado's like right by New Mexico.
Right, but they look the same.
I guess so.
And Colorado is mountainous and snow, so I always think of it as north. That's the one I get fucked up. Which one is north? North Dakota or South Dakota?
This sounds like a trick. South Dakota.
No, it's North Dakota.
Damn it. I was so sure that was a trick.
It was this simple. Okay. But you think if you had a map of Europe, you could name all the countries?
Well, most of the countries, there are some like tiny ones that I might have some difficulty with, but certainly the majority, yeah.
Okay.
I'm 25% Slovene, which is a very small country, part of former Yugoslavia.
When you get to the Baltics and you get to Benelux, that's where it gets tricky for me.
I'm gonna actually do something and pull up my phone here. I want to get you to pronounce the capital of Slovenia.
Well, I was born in Ukraine, so I could probably pronounce it pretty well. But let's find out.
Okay.
I guess now I'm the one answering questions. Is this my welcome?
Okay, try and pronounce that.
Okay, let's see. The capital of Slovenia is Ljubljana.
Wow, you got it.
Of course.
A lot of people struggle with that.
Well, yeah, because it's like is Slovenian close to Polish?
Yeah, like it's a Slavic language.
Yeah. Oh, come on, give me a break. Well, that was a dud. Nice waste of time. Good Lord, Allum. Good Lord. Wait. So let's talk more about. So you've gotten shit from being a Breitbart and being called alt-right. You're one of the people named in that Bernstein hit piece. How did that affect you? And do you think that's accurate?
Being called alt-right?
Yeah.
No, of course not. It's totally ridiculous allegation.
Well, why is it wrong? And
Okay, so the reason I get that allegation is because I co-wrote Breitbart's long explainer on the alt-right. That's called An Establishment Conservatives Guide to the Alt-Right, which, by the way, Bloomberg, every year they do these lists of articles we wish we'd published. That was on their list. So
Wow.
this is something that Bloomberg would have published, according to their own analysis. So this was seen as like an apology for the alt-right, because I guess it wasn't just completely hysterical and saying, oh no, this guy, it actually tried to understand the movement. And it was written at a time in sort of mid-2016 when it wasn't quite clear what the alt-right actually was.
Right.
Lots of people were claiming the label.
and having a label ascribed to them.
Yeah. And the thing that the mainstream media, who were, determined and, determined to dishonestly brand Breitbart and me and multiple other right-wingers as alt-right, they totally ignore the fact that in the piece we isolate the racists of the alt-right movement. We say, these are loser neo-Nazis, nobody really likes them. But at the time that we wrote it, very early stage in the movement, they weren't the only group there. Of course, a few months later, they took over the whole movement, and now the alt-right is totally neo-Nazi.
Right.
But back then, you had like people like Cernovich and even Bill Mitchell claiming the alt-right label.
Bill Mitchell, he's
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah,
king
yeah,
of
yeah.
the. For those
Yeah.
who don't know, Bill Mitchell might be like a boomer script come to life.
Yeah, so what the article pointed out was lots of non-racists were also claiming the label at the time.
Wait, Bill Mitchell called himself alt-right?
Yeah. But obviously, a lot of people then eventually broke away from the movement because the media focused only on Richard Spencer, the extremist, who really wasn't well known at the time. One of the mistakes we made in that piece actually was calling him an intellectual. Like, no, he's a nutcase lunatic. So I'll correct that now. But
Are you just counter signaling?
him and the crazies, no, absolutely not. Like him and the crazies took over the movement shortly after the election. And that was when all the non-racists said, okay, we're done with this label. We're not going to try and fight for it anymore. We're not going to try to fight to claim it from the racists. We're going to call ourselves New Right. So lots of the people who previously called themselves alt-right and weren't racist then moved to the New Right label.
Someone should write a book about the New Right.
Yeah, they should. And there were also, I think we identified 4 groups in the alt-right at the time. One of them was just like the intellectual wing of it. Then you had the racist extreme wing, who later took it over. Then you had the people who became the New Right, who just objected to the left language codes. And we also identified the meme kids, who didn't really have political positions, were just
Shitposters.
just enjoyed making offensive jokes. And I think those guys became Kekistan, because they seem to be the heirs to the whole shitposting tradition.
So I was supposed to have on the show a few weeks ago Sargon of Akkad.
Mm-hmm.
And he flaked at the last minute.
Oh no, I love Sargon. He's great.
Oh, is he great? So but I had so many people online being like, "Why are you talking to him? He's terrible." Is he terrible? Is he not terrible? You're saying he's not terrible.
No. He's divisive because he antagonizes both sides. But no, he's very reasonable on a lot of topics. He's one of these sort of new figures on the internet who attracted a really big following completely independently of any mainstream network. And it really shows you how, especially YouTube, had this potential to be the new sort of talk radio, where you could come in, start a show, start
Right.
talking to an audience, get a following without a huge media empire behind you. Which makes it really sad and troubling that these platforms were in the hands of Silicon Valley crazies who are down-ranking content they don't like now in algorithms, demonetizing them, especially on YouTube, and sometimes just banning them outright.
But the thing I want to interrupt and say, the bannings, you're never told why. If the bannings were done objectively, or like, you could even say, for example, there are all these cases, many such cases, where it's like, this post set you off. Tell me to delete it. Like, why is my whole account and being made invisible? Because when they ban it, they remove all the content, instead of saying, okay, it's locked permanently and this post is getting removed.
Yeah, there's no transparency at all.
Right.
And I feel if they were transparent, their bias would be even more on display, because they'd have to name the reason and link it to a certain post, and you'll be able to see quite clearly that a lot of the things they ban right-wingers for, the reasons they give don't match up to the content they're actually acting on. So how is the NPC meme hate speech?
Right.
I think one of the earliest Twitter bans was Chuck Johnson, who said something along the lines of he's going to take out DeRay. He was talking about it in a journalistic sense. We're going to do a negative hit piece on him.
Yeah.
Twitter interpreted literally and took the opportunity to ban him. So if you... this is why they don't want to be transparent about their reasons and the content that they're acting on, because it would just make them look so ridiculous.
They even said, we don't want to make our reasons public because then people will figure out how to work around them. It's like, isn't that a nice way? Isn't that another way of saying we don't want to say what the rules are because then people would obey them?
Yeah.
And then we wouldn't be able to punish them.
Exactly.
So what do you think is
they're looking for excuses. They want to ban right-wingers at any opportunity they get, and if they make it easier for right-wingers to follow the rules, they won't get those opportunities.
Right. Why is it you've gotten...
By the way, I should say, actually, it's gone beyond right-wingers now. It's gone beyond them because, first of all, we saw in the Facebook purge recently, they purged over 800 accounts and pages, again, just like 2 weeks before the election.
Many of whom were about the police.
Many of whom were about the police. They weren't even explicitly right-wing pages. These were anti-establishment pages.
Right.
Anti-war pages. You had, I saw many left-wing anti-war people on Twitter complaining about these takedowns.
And there's never warning. That's the other thing. Why wouldn't you have a warning if, like, hey, you're acting badly?
And by the way, Facebook is working with their whole crackdown on misinformation. They're working closely with the Atlantic Council, one of the most neocon establishment globalist think tanks there is. I believe Henry Kissinger's a part of them.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not even left versus right. Obviously, the right are affected more at the moment, but it's also, we see now the establishment getting involved and cracking down on anti-establishment of the left and the right.
So have you not been able to get access as a reporter from what rules Twitter has in place to figure out how to flag a post?
I mean, Twitter explains some of their rules, but they won't explain what rule they're enforcing at any given time. So whenever there's a big account banned, we always email Twitter and say, okay, why did you ban them? What rule did they violate? They never give us the reason. Never.
Do they respond at all?
Sometimes they respond saying we don't comment on individual accounts.
But sometimes they do comment on individual accounts. They comment on Alex Jones, for example.
Yeah, so if it's very, very, very high profile, they will make an exception. So when they accidentally suspended Sean Hannity's account once for suspicious behavior on the account, they gave us the reason then. Alex Jones, they gave us the reason, but those were two exceptions. Normally they don't.
If you have ever wondered where your meat comes from, a lot of people want to know where their meat comes from. CrowdCow.com solves that. I'm going to give you the promo code. If you go to crowdcow.com/you're welcome, you get $25 off your first order. $25. So here's what they do. Their goal is to help you discover and enjoy the very best meat from independent farms and make that experience convenient and fun. And not only do you know exactly where your craft meat comes from and how it's raised, it's also healthier and it tastes better. Here, one of the things they feature is grass-fed beef. Here's why grass-fed beef is good for you. It's lower in fat and higher in nutrients. It contains more healthy fats, like omega-3 fatty acids, and it supports normal blood sugar levels. I don't know how to cook, but they were smart. They gave me some free meat. I brought it to Friends Keeping. Jay cooked it up. Everyone's like, oh my God, these steaks are delicious. And I was the hero of the event. They've got everything you want. They've got brisket flats, hanger steaks, and they've got this Japanese Wagyu. You go to crowdcow.com/you're welcome. You look at their Japanese Wagyu. I've never seen meat like this anywhere else. It's so marbled, it's insane. And for a limited time now, they're giving you $20 off on Wagyu ribeye and New York strip steaks and 25% off grass-fed steaks. So if you go to crowdcow.com/you're welcome, you're going to be thanking me.
What else is unconscionable, I think, is that they are not treating people like individuals. They're doing guilt by association. So when they banned Alex Jones, they also banned any accounts associated with him, like, people's personal accounts who were working at his network. And again, Gavin being another example, all the Proud Boy accounts, even though some of them were just probably 5 guys in Wyoming or something, because there's just this whole blanket banning of classes of people. This is, to me, a very kind of type of totalitarian thinking.
Yeah. The other thing, I think, it's not when they ban an account, they're also interfering with consumer choice because millions and millions of people consented to follow Alex Jones and receive his content because they wanted to. That was a choice they were making, and it's a relationship between Alex Jones and his fans, with the network being used as a tool to facilitate that. But suddenly you have the network owner coming in and saying, no, that choice you're making as consumers as individuals is wrong, and I'm going to insert my own moral judgments in between that and break it apart. So it's just a fundamental violation of consumer choice in my view. Whether you agree with Alex Jones or not, people are choosing to follow him, and you're interfering with the choices of individuals if you just suddenly ban him.
So if you were Jack Dorsey and you were running Twitter, would you not ban anyone?
No, I wouldn't actually. I would give users filtering tools and make it easier to block people you don't want to see, because then you're just giving people more choice. What boggles my mind about this social media censorship is that it's totally different from. It started off with a campaign against harassment on social media,
right.
People getting messages they didn't like. But when you think about
which is a real thing,
it's a real thing, yeah. But when you think about it, it's much harder to block, say, letters you're receiving through your mailbox or
Sure.
phone calls than it is to block someone on social media. On social media, just press a button. You can even
Yeah, but then someone can make a dummy account and work your way around it very easily. And once you block them, they're aware that you've blocked them.
Right. Well, that's why you make more sophisticated blocking tools. You can block people via IP address, or you can filter out certain words you don't want to see. This is what Gab recently taken offline by Silicon Valley. We can talk about that later. They didn't ban anyone for lawful speech, but they gave users the ability to filter out certain words. So if there's a certain,
I think Twitter has that.
I think they recently introduced
Yeah.
it, but they're doing the banning as well. And actually, Twitter talks about in the leaked Project Veritas videos, they were talking about banning certain types of behavior, certain types of language, a way of speaking. Why is that their decision? If you want to ban certain types of language, why shouldn't the individual user have that ability rather than some guy in Silicon Valley making that decision on your behalf?
Yeah, but if I'm running, let's suppose, a church, right, and I can say I don't want anyone cursing in here.
Yeah.
I mean, would you be against that?
No, but I think the appropriate analogy there is a church on social media with a bunch of followers filtering out certain words from their feed and maybe giving their followers an option to opt into that same filter.
Right, but if
I think Twitter is the platform. They're not supposed to be a publisher.
that's the big issue, right?
That
Is
is
it
the
a
big
platform or a publisher?
Yeah.
Because at a certain point, like this is where the walls argument goes in reverse. Like one of the big arguments people have against the pro-immigrant side is you have locks to your house. The doors aren't open, so walls obviously work. And there's a parallel here. It's like at a certain point, you wouldn't kick off people for doxing.
For doxing, that's a tricky one because then you have privacy rights clashing with freedom of speech, and that's always been an issue in law. Beyond social media,
Sure.
That's a more difficult one. I'm not sure I could say I wouldn't kick off people for doxing. That's something that merits some serious consideration because it's privacy versus freedom. But I certainly wouldn't kick up anyone for lawful. For lawful speech that doesn't violate people's privacy or doesn't violate people's rights in some way. When it comes to the publisher versus platform thing, a lot of free marketers will say, but there are some good stories coming on this and how many of the establishment conservatives who make this private companies argument are actually in the pay of Google, and I've seen some of that material. But the argument is these are private companies, the government shouldn't be getting involved. Well, the government already is involved under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. They give these companies, these web companies, special privileges. They say if you're a platform and not a publisher, you'll be exempt from lawsuits related to user-generated content. So if a user posts defamatory content on Twitter or Facebook won't get sued.
Yeah,
Because if they were liable for the millions and millions of posts all their users made, they couldn't function as a business. That's why they have that protection. But they're already given this special privilege by the government. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to say that if you have a privilege from the government, that should come with some obligation also.
Well, I mean, this is the problem. Whenever you have government involvement, you're going to have more government involvement. Like, let's look at an example of Craigslist, right? And Backpage, where the Human Trafficking Act, or whatever it was called, basically was said, anything that you publish, any ad that's on your site, like Craigslist, that is used in the means of human trafficking, you're going to be responsible for. And Craigslist, which they're prostitutions, escorts, whatever, and Backpage, are like, we have no way of knowing two people whose names we don't know. If they get together and it's some kind of sex act, we're going to be sued for it. We're going to have to shut down.
Well, exactly. They had to shut down. So this, to me, is an argument in favor of strengthening 230 and saying if you want to be a platform, you have to be neutral, because...
But my point is, you yourself said you can't be neutral. If they have to ban doxers.
Yeah, well, actually, I think that the whole Sesta thing was not really a good move, frankly.
The what move?
The whole Sesta Foster thing that shut down those sites was not really a good move. It actually forced all these problematic industries underground, made it harder to protect people. I agree with the libertarian argument on that one. But going back to social media.
But don't you? Here's what I think you're not appreciating. If they do what you're saying, it's going to take the next left-wing administration to force them to start banning people under whatever auspices, because neutrality means telling the truth. You can understand the mental gymnastics I'll go through very easily. And then Facebook and Twitter will be able to say, we're not doing it. The government's making us do it. So they won't even have culpability.
So you're saying the left-wing, if you enforce this publisher platform distinction, then the next left-wing administration will force them to be published of certain types of content?
Yes.
Yeah, but what happened with Craigslist? What happened with Backpage? They shut down. You can't have this business model if you're being forced to moderate all your content and make sure it never goes bad. It's impossible. You have to shut down. So the whole point is it's impossible to be a It's impossible for a platform to be held liable for its content in that way. They have no option other than shutting down.
Right.
So you have to remain. If you enforce the distinction, the platforms will have to remain neutral or go out of business.
But you're acting as if the term neutral has an objective meaning.
Well, I think it does. It's quite simple. You don't ban lawful speech.
What's their answer to that?
Whose answer?
The left, the Democratic president and the Democratic Congress. What's their answer to that? You don't know what they're going to say?
There are certain types of speech that are unlawful, and you got to...
There you go. And those speech, and you know what here's what they say: libel and what's the other one? One's written and one's said. Perjury is not free speech, and lying and writing is not free speech. So being neutral means you have to ban those people who are spreading lies.
That'd certainly try and mess with these platforms, sure, but
that wouldn't happen?
It might happen, and they might go out of business.
Wait, hold on. No, you're not hearing me. You're saying that if they have a pretext for the government to say, you have to be neutral and protect lawful speech, and then you define any speech that's against what you like as unlawful, because hate speech is not free speech.
But it's much harder for the government to define speech as unlawful, because then they're subject to the First Amendment, and the Supreme Court can strike that down.
They don't have to define it legally. They have to define it heuristically, and then Twitter and Facebook are the ones enforcing it and saying, look...
But they can challenge that. They can say, no, this speech actually
Why would they want to challenge it?
Because they want to stay in business.
No. But they don't have... The choice is, for them, in that scenario, either we go out of business, or... we agree with our overlords who are giving us cover to act duplicitously, and now we're going to ban entire classes of people. Which do you think they're going to choose?
Obviously banning entire classes of people. But it's going to... I'm not saying it solves all the problems to enforce the distinction. It solves a lot of them. Because there's only so far the government can go. They can't say you have to ban hate speech because that's obviously unconstitutional.
Do you understand the difference between what the government does legally and what politicians say verbally? There's a big difference there. So what I'm saying is legally, it would not be enforced. But you have the talking points, and then Jack and Mark Zuckerberg can say publicly, well, we're trying to preclude lawsuits and trying to preclude being shut down, so we're going to ban all misinformation because that's libel. You can't see them saying this? Right now, they'll tell you with a straight face that hate speech is not protected legal speech, right? Which is a lie. It's a blatant lie. There's nothing.
I don't think they've ever said to my in my knowledge that that hate speech isn't legal. They just say it's not allowed on that platform because they
say it's not protected, which means nothing. It's protected is not a legal concept.
Right, exactly. Well,
it's double
talk. It's
talk.
not protected on their platform.
Right.
But they're not claiming it's illegal.
Some of them? Wait. Maybe not Jack and Mark, but you don't think the median left-wing NPC believes this legally?
Oh, sure. They believe it's illegal, but it's not. The Supreme Court has made that clear. And it's going to be a lot... it's going to be a lot harder for the government to say, well, you got to ban hate speech. They wouldn't be able to do that.
There's again.
Well, look, the government has to at least try to follow the First Amendment.
Absolutely.
Publishers do not.
Right.
That's why you make them platforms and force them to be platforms and say, if you're not acting like a platform, then you will be held subject to the liabilities of a publisher. It doesn't solve all the problems, but it certainly makes it harder for social media platforms to censor. And then you fight the next battle and the next one, because there'll always be attempts to censor from the left and from the Democrats and from everyone else. But that's why you have to fight all the battles. And the current battle is with these social media companies who are just inventing any rule that they want, whether it's constitutional or not.
HeshySocks.com, welcome 30 is the promo code. You guys hear me talking about them. You guys hear me tweeting about them. They were smart. Heshy Socks sent me one pair, and they were my house pair. And I like them because they were soft. They've got great support in the heel. They are antimicrobial, the bacteria, and it's Pima cotton. It's this fancy high-end cotton. Then they send me a bunch more for free. And I'm walking around in them every single day. They've got all the styles you want. They've got the fancy ones, and they've got the simple ones that you can wear with a suit. You can wear them with sneakers. Anything you like, they'll have it there. It's HeshySocks.com, HESHI Socks.com, and promo code WELCOME30. It's like wearing pillows for your feet. Dress shoes are comfortable if you have the right socks. Regular socks don't provide protection at all, and your feet start hurting at the end of the day. These don't have that, HeshySocks.com. And arch support in the center of the foot. So HeshySocks.com, promo code WELCOME30, and then you tweet at me, and you tell me how much you enjoyed wearing your Heshy socks. And I'll say, you're welcome. Again, here's why they're great. All Heshy socks are cushioned in the footbed, the heel and the toe, maximum comfort. Arch support in the center of the foot, made with high-end Pima cotton, which is super soft, highly breathable and absorbent if your feet sweat. Antibacterial, which kills the bacteria and keeps your feet from stinking, and has a bunch of different styles. HESHI Socks.com.
My point is, when you have introducing the government as a regulator, even if you're regulating so-called neutrality, that will give people a legal pretext, a disingenuous legal pretext, to ban entire groups.
But they will still be that will still be bounded by what's lawful and what isn't lawful.
Who's going to sue them?
Well, the tech companies.
Yeah, in those scenarios, the ACLU.
When they're publishers?
Yeah.
Oh, well, like the people who are being defamed on the platforms, obviously.
What do you mean defamed?
Well, if someone posts something defamatory on Twitter, something that someone deems to be defamatory towards them, then they go and sue Twitter. And there'll be thousands and thousands of those lawsuits if these guys become publishers.
Right. So in that case, anything that's marginally offensive, they will preemptively, to avoid the cost of a lawsuit is more than.
Well, no, yeah, but that's my entire point. They'll have to remain platforms. They won't be able to go down the publisher route. At the moment, they're taking the legal protections of platforms. We're not liable for all this content, while behaving like publishers, saying we're going to moderate this and that and ban this and that. What should happen is, if you start moderating and banning, any all these categories of speech, imposing your own values, then you should become a publisher.
But my point is, there's no scenario where you can't ban some people. Even if, here's an example.
Right. I mean, that may well be true, but you enforce this distinction, to be a lot harder for them to do so.
I don't see it.
Because if they cross into the publisher category, then they will go out of business, as we saw with Craigslist.
Right.
And Backpage.
My gut and history, my understanding of history tells me that when you have these huge corporations who have Congress in their pocket, any way that the laws are written or enforced will always be done so in a way that furthers their needs and is against that of the public.
I'm not going to wholly disagree with your pessimism there.
I don't think that's pessimism. I think you have to. That's the framework you have to look at.
That's why you have to keep fighting the battles. You win this one, and then when the government tries to do it with the Democrats, you fight that battle as well. And then you fight the next one and the next one and the next one, and you keep doing it. But we can't just surrender to these Silicon Valley giants who are behaving totally arbitrarily. We've got to lay down some clear standards, some clear rules.
I'm not saying surrender at all. What I'm saying is,
what would your solution be?
My solution, which I think is going to happen inevitably, if you look at in my lifetime, the following organizations were going to take over the world: The Gap, Starbucks, ITT, ATT, Microsoft Internet Explorer. I'm sure you remember when Microsoft Internet Explorer came free with Windows, and therefore everyone's going to use it, and therefore Microsoft will control the internet. How many people use Microsoft Internet Explorer now?
So your argument is some other company will come along and replace these guys?
And not necessarily per se, but my biggest example is the dating apps. It used to be OkCupid and eHarmony, and now there's 50? And they're much more specific. My point is, there does not need to be, and it is wholly unnatural for there to be one platform or publisher, whichever the correct term is, where everyone's talking to each other. Whereas the goal is for people who have some Venn diagram to talk to each other. Whereas if you're a hard leftist or if you're a hard righty and you never want to see hard left thought, that's fine. Go to your site where there's, it'll be a bell curve of views and you're in the center maybe, and you'll up to Hillary, let's suppose, or up to Rudy Giuliani on the right, and it'll be broken up that way. And I think it's very unnatural to have everyone in one place.
Okay, but that's already
I agree.
We saw the beginnings of that with Gab and what happened.
I think Gab was a bad example because Gab was trying to be Twitter's rejects. Gab never positioned itself as having
So there shouldn't be a place for Twitter's rejects on the entire internet?
No, I don't think anyone self-identifies as Twitter's reject. People identify as conservative. People identify as... Hold on, let me finish. People identify as moms. I'm into cooking, so there could be a cooking Twitter, or a pet Twitter, or a political Twitter.
Right, but you're describing things that would never get banned, cooking and mums, but, unorthodox...
Or cops. It could be a I hate cops Twitter, and that did get banned on Facebook.
Right, but what's going to happen is exactly the same thing that happened with Gab. The social networks for, mild, non-political things will be all right. They'll be allowed to remain on the internet. The ones that the elites don't approve of will get shut down by payment processors, will get shut down by cloud providers, will get shut down by DNS registrars.
But you can't deny that right now the PayPal, DNS, and all those other things are already an issue that has to be taken care of, regardless of what happens with Twitter.
Of course.
Right. So the point is, like you said, it's constantly a battle. Yeah, now it has to be like, okay, what are the spigots that they can turn off? And now you have to create alternatives to these spigots. So we're running out of time. The last one, what I want to talk to you about is Kim.com. I know very little about him, but my understanding is that he's working very strongly in this area because, again, this is like a gamer thing. When you're a gamer and you're playing a dungeon, you got to clear the dungeon, right? That's the verb. I played plenty of RPGs in my day. So you have to clear this floor, then this floor, then this floor, right? So again, realizing, okay, here are the mechanisms they can use to shut it down. It used to be banning you from Twitter. And you couldn't get a URL, then it's $10 a year, it's namesilo.com, whatever. Okay, let me try. Now PayPal has that option, and now the registrars have that option. So now for each of these, we have to create alternative pathways to make sure a person can't be shut down. Is he not working in this regard?
So this is an area where the free market alternative does provide some hope, because the holy grail in all of this is the decentralized blockchain-based services where no one's really in charge and there's no way to censor anyone without the agreement of the entire network, which never happens.
Right.
The hurdle that has to be overcome is user-friendliness. The problem with blockchain-based technologies, including Bitcoin, is that, there's just too many hurdles for regular people to overcome. You can solve that problem, this could be the solution. But honestly, I disagree with pinning all your hopes on just one thing. It's great, that should develop, we should support it, but we should also look at the regulation, we should also look at the platform publisher distinction. We should be fighting them on every single battlefield we can.
Well, I'll tell you this. I think it's more useful, rather than try to have a legal recategorization, to have hearings and to have them have all this stuff made public and exposed, things that they're desperate to hide. That would, I think, be far more useful than having some edict that whoever can interpret whichever way they want.
We should do that too. We should be fighting on every field.
Sure, but I don't think having the government do things is fighting them. I think it's surrendering, because the government is the enemy. Let's talk about...
I don't buy that at all.
Okay, let's talk Rule Britannia. Let's talk about what the government's doing in the UK. Is porn legal in the UK? I don't understand this at all. Is porn not been made illegal somehow?
There was a whole furor about violent porn a long time ago, 2011. I'm not sure if I'm getting the date right. But I think they essentially ended up banning all BDSM porn. I think that's essentially illegal. It's not really enforced, but to my knowledge, but yet they ban a lot of porn.
Yeah. So that's one thing. What about this whole
They
thing?
also filtered it on the internet, I believe. I think it's like TVs now, where you can only access porn after a certain time of day. That's when the filters automatically switch up. I think I'm not really an expert on the top, so I'm probably misremembering the details, but they certainly have some sort of like time limited filter
What is this whole thing with TV
across the entire internet.
Yeah. What is this thing about TV licenses in Britain?
Yeah. So if you want to access the BBC, you got to pay a license fee. I forget how much it is because I obviously don't have a license. The idea is the BBC is publicly funded, therefore you got to pay for it. You got to pay the government, and that way you don't have ads or whatever.
So it's like HBO here.
It's total nonsense. No one likes it. Taxpayers already pay for the BBC.
Right. The whole point of something.
There was this amazing meme, pre-internet meme that the BBC and the government spread, that the BBC would go around with these vans, and they could tell with these vans with these big satellite dishes on them who had a license and who didn't. Total nonsense, but a lot of people believed it.
Wait, so
that if you didn't have your license and you watched the BBC, some van would come and detect you.
Isn't the premise that if something's publicly funded, it should be free for the public? You're paying for it through your taxes already.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the license fee is total nonsense, and I think there's broad agreement amongst across the left, right, that it's stupid.
What is British coverage of American politics like versus American coverage of American politics?
Just very left wing. Yeah, the BBC is supposed to be unbiased. They're not. They're full of leftists. They all hate Trump. Some exceptions like Andrew Neil, who generally does a good job. He's also the editor of the not the editor, but senior position at the Spectator. He's a sort of pretty decent, level-headed conservative type. But BBC is very institutionally left-wing. The Guardian, a very left-wing newspaper as well, sort of our version of the New York Times, I guess.
No, the Guardian's much worse than the Times.
Yeah,
they're
probably,
a caricature.
Probably, yeah, now that
it's
I think
like
about it.
It's like if Jezebel ran the New York Times.
Yeah,
because their articles, our headlines go viral
like
because they're so
New York
absurd.
Times if every New York Times writer was Sarah Jung.
Yeah. It's really.
But there are also
there.
some great British papers. The Daily Mail being one. The Daily Mail, incidentally, has been banned on Wikipedia as a source.
As have you.
As has Breitbart.
Can you explain what that means?
So Wikipedia is a crowdsourced encyclopedia. It's the idea that if you get lots of people together and make them totally anonymous and say, okay, fight over what the facts are and give them certain rules, then you'll get all these super accurate pages. That's not what's happened. Left-wing editors have taken over. They've decided what counts as a reliable source and what doesn't, because every Wikipedia article, if you make a factual claim about a topic, it has to be sourced. And there's a whole list of reliable...
Famously, citation needed.
Citation needed.
Yeah.
And there are a whole list. There's a whole list they have of reliable sources that are decided collectively by the senior editors. And obviously, you look through the list, you'll find right-wing news constantly labeled unreliable. You'll find mainstream news like CNN being labeled reliable. Academic sources are always reliable. Academic journals are reliable. All academic journals, apparently, even the postmodern ones. I'm not sure if you saw this thing Quillette did.
Yes.
That group of academics who hoaxed a number of journals with total nonsense. But yeah, that's the situation in Wikipedia. You have a few left-wing editors determining what's reliable and what isn't. So Wikipedia has always been inaccurate. I mean, school teachers will never recommend Wikipedia for research. But it's becoming increasingly more unreliable, increasingly more partisan. And we saw a number of scandals during the past year, especially with Google. So one of the things Google does, and now Facebook and YouTube are relying on Wikipedia as well to sort of, they grab information from Wikipedia and put it in these little knowledge panels. You often see these knowledge panels at the top of Google searches. So in one case, if you search for California Republican Party, the knowledge panel would say, this is a neo-Nazi party. The reason it said that was because Google was taking information from Wikipedia, and some left-wing troll had put that on the California Republican Party's Wikipedia page. To show how easy it was, some conservatives then went to Neil Gorsuch's Wikipedia page and put his description as owner of the libs. And then Google for a brief while, the top results for Neil Gorsuch described him as a world-renowned lib owner.
Have things gotten worse since you started covering these issues, or have things gotten better?
Oh, much worse. Like every single platform has gone from... Like, I grew up when these platforms were relatively free and they were serious about their commitments to free speech. There was a time when Reddit was, fighting... actually hesitating before shutting down a page that posted revenge porn. Like, that's how committed they were to free speech. They were like letting legitimately disgusting, awful subreddits stay on their site because they didn't want to cross that line of being a publisher rather than a platform. And honestly, that was a good approach. Unfortunately, we had this meme in the media, that there's all this nastiness on social media, all these horrible things, and the Silicon Valley needs to take responsibility. No, a telephone company does not take responsibility for its the conversations people have on the network. It's just a provider of a network. So this whole idea that Facebook or Twitter or Reddit or any of these platforms should take responsibility for what their users say, or you're going to blame them when there's something horrible on their platform, no matter what it is bizarre to me. Even potentially illegal stuff. I mean, if a terrorist uses a phone call to plan a bombing, you don't shut down the network or attack the network. That's nonsense. Let's
talk about it this way. Do you think it's appropriate or acceptable for a public library to ban smelly people?
Of course, but is that the correct analogy for a social media platform?
Well, let me ask you this. If I'm running a company, I want to attract as many people as possible to a point. At a certain point, certain people I attract, they're going to disattract some others, right? So the marginal benefit of that one person will have a significantly higher marginal cost, right?
I see what you're saying. Some people, this is Twitter's argument that certain people force other people off the platform.
Right.
Okay, the correct way to approach that is to give users the better abilities to filter out, even preemptively filter out smelly users, to use the analogy. And phone companies are also better at this. They give people better blocking tools. If you're getting prank calls or spam from advertisers and so on, they'll give you the tools to block that. But I think that's the way social media platforms could go, because again, it comes back to central planning versus decentralized planning.
But
right?
you also talked about
you either have one expert sitting in Silicon Valley deciding we're going to ban him and him and him and him, or you decentralize that. And the decentralized way is much more efficient. There are much less mistakes. We know this from history. That's the approach that should be taken.
But we also talked earlier about how Gamergate, these people are very good at figuring out how to exploit systems and work their way around things.
Well, yeah, but
so who's going to be smarter, the grandma or the Gamergater?
Okay. Look, you're explaining that the problem is kind of difficult, but systems learn over time. They adapt in the same way that people adapt. And again, it's a constant battle to outwit the trolls and the spammers and all of these people.
I think there's a difference between saying people should
But what makes the centralized system more efficient? What makes the guy...
I'm not saying it makes it more efficient, per se. Yeah. I don't know what efficient means necessarily in this context. I'm saying it's more valid that I can run my company how I want. The point is,
but the point you were making earlier was that trolls will get around this blocking, right?
Right.
Well, why can't they get around banning?
Well, they do get around banning.
Okay, so there's no banning is not therefore superior to blocking in any way.
It is superior in certain contexts. If I'm some grandma who doesn't understand how to use my blocking tools, the banner will make sure she doesn't see that objectionable person. I mean, it depends on how I want to run my company and who my audience is.
Not if they get around the bans.
Sure, no.
If they can get around the block, they can get around the bans.
Not necessarily. I mean, there's different tools for each. One by definition.
But you were making a general argument that Gamergate types and people are so smart they'll get around all these blocking systems. Well, a ban is no different.
It is different. If you're going by, they clearly operate in different ways, right? Some are going to be more effective than others. I don't know. I'm not a tech person, and in this sense, a programmer. One is going to be more efficient than the other. I don't know a priori. My point isn't what's more effective. My point is, I don't agree that there is anything wrong per se with a company saying I'm going to block certain types of behaviors. However, if they're going to do that, it would behoove them to be public and open and honest about.
There absolutely is a problem with that. These are digital public space. Google admitted.
I don't agree with public spaces.
Google admitted in their own presentation, their own research document, that these companies have taken over the internet. They dominate the majority of online
Sure.
speech. That's the language they use.
Sure.
And the internet was created as this public square where everyone should be able to speak.
I don't believe in a public anything, including a public square. I certainly don't believe in the fact that everyone has a right to go to the library and stink it up. And I think this is the problem with public property. It becomes a tragedy of the commons. Whereas if you have private property, which companies are, and here there's...
But you do have the right to stand on the sidewalk and distribute your leaflets.
Sure, but the point is that
And
sidewalk...
no one wants to take that away.
I do.
You want to take that away?
Yes,
okay,
that
explain
sidewalk...
that. Why do you want to
that
take...
sidewalk should be private.
You're on ANCAP. You want to privatize everything.
Yes, because then you don't have these problems. And very often, those people handing out pamphlets are going to be blocking the stairs, in which case you get elbowed by me as I'm walking past you. My point is, there's a difference between...
Well, if we lived in an ANCAP world, that would be great, because
we
then...
do live in an ANCAP world.
We don't. We absolutely don't. Okay.
We do live in an ANCAP world
I'll tell
because
you this,
anarchism correlates to reality.
No. The obstacle currently that... the biggest obstacle, I'd say, to alternative tech platforms is the dominance of the credit card companies.
Yes, I agree. And you think those aren't in bed with the government?
They are.
Is there anyone more in bed with the government?
Right. So if we lived in an ANCAP world, there'd be all sorts of banks and credit cards that we could choose from, and some of them would be censorious and some of them wouldn't.
Correct.
But we live in a world currently where it's just two credit cards, Visa and MasterCard.
Of course.
They pressure the payment processors.
Of course.
They pressure the crowdfunding platforms, and that's why we have the system.
What?
So... yes, break down the whole system, have an ANCAP world, that's fine, I agree with you, but we don't live in that world currently. So
what I'm saying, if you let me finish on my own show, what I meant by we live in an ANCAP world is that anarcho-capitalism describes reality accurately, not the fact that governments don't exist. Now, there's this great book called The Goal, which I read in college and I never thought anything of, and I hated the teacher, and I really got nasty with her, and even though she was a sweet lady and probably didn't deserve it. And what this book pointed out brilliantly, which I would encourage everyone thinking about this specific issue to read, is the points of what's the goal of a business? And the goal is to make money. And how this author breaks it down is you look at your process from conception to execution to production, and you look at, okay, what is the one thing currently that is slowing me down and minimizing me making money? Fix that. Then once that's fixed, something else is going to be the thing that's slowing you down, the bottleneck. You fix that. Okay, now something else. And that's how you constantly improve. My point is, in this context, even if they were made into platforms or publishers, whichever, the reverse of what they are now, you and I have no disagreement that they would be trying something else. Just like this is an attempt to implement McCain-Feingold by other means. And then you have to figure out what that is. You have to figure this. And what's happening now is, okay, we have to look at Visa and MasterCard. Those weren't on the radar 3 years ago. Now they're clearly on the radar, and the registrar's on the radar. So far more than worrying about, in my view, Twitter, which is a problem, I'm much more worried about things that are under the radar and much more effective, and specifically PayPal, Visa and MasterCard, and registrars than Twitter, because there is a tension on Twitter, but these are really dangerous.
I actually agree with you there. I think the word people are using them with internet infrastructure providers.
Yes.
You can't build a website without those services. So I agree. Those are actually the bigger threat.
Yeah. Okay.
We have no disagreement there. But Twitter's also a problem. And I think
I'm not disagreeing with that.
The publisher platform is a battle that has to be fought.
It's being fought. But I just don't think it's going to... I honestly, I think obviously congressional hearings and things like this is going to be a Sisyphean affair. I think before that happens, something's going to happen that, I'm not saying the problem will solve itself, but certainly the harm that they're doing will be severely mitigated.
Well, I hope to see that happen as
Yeah.
well. And I do have high hopes for Kim.com's product.
Yeah. Can you tell us more? We didn't get into that. Tell us briefly what he's talking about.
So he's talking about developing a decentralized alternative to Twitter, where a totally uncensored network. There will be volunteer moderators to crack down on illegal content. But if it's all tied to the blockchain, then he said decentralized. He didn't talk about. I don't believe he talked about blockchains. But if it is that is the way he goes, then there'll essentially be no way to censor it. The problem with blockchain type things is that they tend to be difficult for users to get a handle on.
But this almost sounds like a kid between 4chan and Twitter.
A what?
A child between 4chan and Twitter.
Yeah. But again, I think the platform that people want, the majority of people want, is one where they decide what they see, and it's not some guy in Silicon Valley.
Oh, no. I'm going to leave you with this Mencken quote. The average man does not want to be free. He wants to be safe. And the average person does want the guy in Silicon Valley to curate what he sees, and that's why he watches The Big Bang Theory. And that's why it's the most popular show on TV.
You're on ANCAP and you have such a negative view of human nature?
It's not a negative. Human nature is not neither negative or positive. It's either accurate or inaccurate. And human beings are animals. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, but animals want limits. They want borders. Brave New World is very much more the issue than 1984. And I think people are uncomfortable with things that they find disturbing. And one of the things that they find most disturbing is innovation. Because that Who Moved My Cheese movement.
We are getting way off the topic of tech here, but if you start with a negative view of human nature, doesn't that lead to the Leviathan? You need power to keep people in line.
It's not, but you don't need power because they want you to keep them in line. You don't think most people want to be told how to dress, what to eat, what shows to watch, what music to listen to?
Many do. That is human nature.
That's all I'm saying. Sure. But they're irrelevant. They're the herd. They're gonna, these are the same people who would be for Ahmadinejad if they had been born in Iran. And here they're the NPCs, either right-wing or left-wing NPCs. And in Britain, they'd be, nice little Englanders, or they'd be the hardcore identity politics. But there's no agency to them. And we're tying it all up in a nice bow. And on that note, you are welcome. Awesome.